Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on the topic of the Zodiac. And next week we'll be discussing service through knowledge and works. We also meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. United Lodge of Theosophists is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification in practice of those principles, through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. I will now make known to thee that path which the learned in the Vedas call indestructible, into which enter those who are free from attachments, and is followed by those desirous of leading the life of a brahmacharya, laboring for salvation. He who closeth all the doors of his senses, imprisoneth his mind in his heart, fixeth his vital powers in his head, standing firm in meditation, repeating the monosyllable Om, and thus continues when he is quitting the body, goeth to the supreme goal. He who, with heart undiverted to any other object, meditates constantly and through the whole of life on me shall surely attain to me, O son of Pritha. Those great souled ones who have attained to supreme perfection come unto me, and no more incur rebirths rapidly revolving, which are mansions of pain and sorrow. All worlds up to that of Brahman are subject to rebirth again and again, but they, O son of Kunti, who reach to me have no rebirth. Those who are acquainted with day and night know that the day of Brahma is 1,000 revolutions of the yugas, and that his night extendeth for 1,000 more. At the coming on of that night of that day, all things issue forth from the unmanifested into manifestation. So on the approach of that night, they merge again into the unmanifested. This collection of existing things, having thus come forth, is dissolved at the approach of the night, O son of Pritha. And now again on the coming of the day, it emanates spontaneously. But there is that which upon the dissolution of all things else is not destroyed. It is indivisible, indestructible, and of another nature from the visible. That called the unmanifested and exhaustless is called the supreme goal, which, having once attained, they never more return. It is my supreme abode. This supreme, O son of Pritha, within whom all creatures are included, and by whom all this is pervaded, may be attained by a devotion which is intent on him alone. And now for today's talk.
Can you please put these on the phone? Stick it out.
Put it on the board.
Good morning and welcome, everyone.
Let me get some pen.
Um,
For a minute.
We're going to look at the zodiac from a different perspective today. And for this talk, we are going to go to Isis Unveiled. And if we have time, we will connect it to the information given in 5 years of Theosophy from the Sanskrit perspective. If you all wish to read on this subject, you can go to the Secret Doctrine 2, and this starts around 435. On the board, we have the diagrams that HPV presented in Isis Unveiled. Ezekiel's wheel, one is representative of the exoteric, and the other one is esoteric. In order to understand what is presented here today, we need to remind ourselves of the cosmogony presented in the Secret Doctrine, and we will briefly go over it. 1. The universe is not a spontaneous creation, but an evolution from pre-existing matter. We all know that the moon chain is the mother of our Earth. 2. That it is only one of an endless series of universes. Remembering that we're not talking about short period of time, but we're talking about millions and millions of time, millions of years of time. That eternity is pointed off into ground cycles, in each of which 12 transformations of our world occur, following its partial destruction by fire and water alternately. So that when a new minor period sets in, the Earth is so changed, even geologically, as to be practically a new world. 4. That of these 12 transformations, the Earth after each of the first 6 is grosser. In other words, we become more material oriented, and everything on it, men included, more material than the preceding one. While after each of the remaining 6, the contrary is true. Both Earth and men growing more and more refined and spiritual with each terrestrial change. 5. That when the apex of the cycle is reached, a gradual dissolution takes place, and every living and objective form is destroyed. But when that point is reached, humanity has become fitted to live subjectively as well as objectively. And not humanity alone, but also animals, plants, and every atom. After a time of rest, when a new world becomes self-formed, the astral souls of animals and of all beings, except such as have reached the highest nirvana, will return on earth again to end their cycles of transformations and to become men in their turn. This stupendous conception the ancients synthesized for the instruction of the common people into a single pictorial design, and this is the zodiac, the celestial belt. Instead of the 12 signs that are used now, originally there were only 10. So these were Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Scorpio was 1. There was no Libra, Sagittarius, Capricornus, Aquarius, and Pisces following. These were all exoteric. But there were two mystical signs inserted which were known to the initiates and understood by them. And at the sign now called Scorpio, as you can see, the sign that represents Virgo and Scorpio is very similar. At the beginning, when there were only 10 signs, this one did not exist. It was just this one. But when the 7th got added, this was duplicated and became Scorpio, and the rest followed. Now, in the explanations given, we are told that the first half from Aries to Virgo represent the macrocosmic or spiritual evolution. Libra is the connection between the two, and then the Scorpio down to Pisces is the microcosmic aspect because it involves Earth and its transformation. So the first 6 are the ascending, macrocosm, spiritual, last 6 descending, microcosm, secondary world, merely a reflection of the first. So this division was called Ezekiel's wheel. Ezekiel's wheel, and was completed this way. The ascending 5 signs were ephemerized into patriarchs. So here she's telling us that the patriarchs are actually these. Patriarchs. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and this group concluded with Virgo, Scorpio. Then came the turning point, which is Libra or Libra, however we pronounce it, and the sign Virgo, Scorpio was duplicated and transferred to the lower descending group, which is the microcosm, which runs down to Pisces or Noah, which represents the deluge. To make it clearer then, Libra is here. Enoch, Hermes is the same. And she tells us what that means. She says, Libra, the 7th sign, which is Enoch or angel Metatron, or mediator between spirit and matter, God and man. It now is Cain. Scorpio becomes Cain, which sign or patriarch led man to destruction according to the theological interpretation, but in fact she's telling us, according to the wisdom religion, it indicated the degradation of the whole universe in its course of evolution downward from the subjective to the objective. So, subjective to objective. So, Libra or Libra was invented by the Greeks. It is assumed that they were the inventors. And that was a very beautiful idea because Libra, balance, is the expression of balance, and the initiates still held on to the secret knowledge without divulging it to the common people. So at the lowest point, the divine spark of the spirit began to convey the upward impulse. The scales typified that eternal equilibrium, which is the necessity of a universe of harmony, of exact justice, of the balance of centripetal and centrifugal forces, darkness and light, spirit and matter. So then Libra represent the balance between all those forces: centripetal, centrifugal, our world, and the higher aspect of that consciousness, matter and the spirit when it is contrasted, darkness and light. So it is here. This balance point is here, and then Scorpio leads us downward. But there's an important point to be made about that, because we need to understand what the theological books, when interpreted correctly, what they actually divulge. The theological interpretation is not correct, but there is an interpretation nevertheless that will give us the correct meaning of what it is that we're reading. The additional signs of the zodiac, we are told, warrant us in saying that the book of Genesis, as we now find it, must be of a later date than the invention of the Libra by the Greeks, because we find the chapters of the genealogies remodeled to fit the new zodiac rather than the other way around. So the rabbinical compilers started repeating these names because the genealogies are given in two sections. One is Sethite and the other one is the Kenite, and we'll put it here. Mine is missing. Okay, and you can actually go to the book, and this is on page 459, and follow how it is explained as to how to remove the copy of the first section, because in order the rabbinical information not to get out, they had to produce doubt in people's minds, so they came up with the Kenite table, which is exactly the same as this one here. And we are told that the Genesis, among all of the books of the Bible, belongs to an immense antiquity. The others are all later additions, the earliest of which appeared with Hilkiah, who evidently concocted it with the help of Huldah, the prophetess. So, HPV is telling that the original Bible does not exist, but the one we have at this time that she's talking about is 900 years old. We have been in evolution over 2,000 years. The Bible is not the original Bible, and that one, we are told, has been altered. So now we go to the lines of generations, the genealogy of the patriarch, and see what we are told. The 10 biblical patriarchs are identical with the Hindu Prajapatis and the Sephiroth of the Kabbalah. The Sephiroth of the Kabbalah is in the glossary, and the 10 emanations of the deity are explained in the glossary. This is a very comprehensive talk, cannot really give all of the details, but perhaps if we cannot do it all in one day, we will talk about it a little bit more in a separate presentation again. But if we read it from the glossary, the 10 emanations of deity, the highest is informed by the concentration of the Ein Sof Or or the limitless light, and each sephira produces by emanation another sephira. So the 10, the primary three are Kether, number 1, which is the crown, Chokmah, number 2, which represents wisdom, Binah is number 3, which represents understanding. And descending order, the rest is given, ending with 10, which is Malkuth, which is our kingdom, which is earth. Now, if you follow the process given on this page, we eliminate all of the names in the Kenite, which is a duplicate of the Sethite, and we end up only with one name, which is Cain. And we turn to Sethite table and find that Enos or Enoch, second from Adam, is the father of Cain. And we're told this is no accident. There was an evident reason for this inversion of paternity, a palpable design that of creating confusion and baffling inquiry. So she says, we say that the patriarchs are simply the signs of the zodiac, emblems in their manifold aspects of the spiritual and physical evolution of human races, of ages, and of divisions of time. And Abel, having disappeared from the line of descent, he is replaced by Seth, which is the second on the Sethite table. So it is clearly an afterthought, we are told, suggested by the necessity of not having the human race descend entirely from a murderer. This dilemma being apparently first noticed when the Kenite table had been completed, Adam is made, after all the generations had appeared, to beget the son Seth. It is a suggestive fact that whereas the double-sexed Adam of chapter 5 is made in the likeness of the Elohim, whereas Seth is begotten in Adam's own likeness, thus signifying that there were men of different races. It is also most noticeable that neither age or a single other particular respecting the patriarch in the Kenite table is given, whereas the reverse is true of the Sethite line. And we write the patriarchs as given in here, which is the esoteric one. And HPB says, in the explanations given, she has turned the key one time. But in order to understand what the zodiac truly stands for, which is, she told us what it is, we have to turn the key 7 times, not just 1 time. So we see Yod Heva here, and in the explanation, Jehovah is a third-rate God. It is the tribal God of Israel, but she tells us it is not number 1. In other words, a tribal God cannot be taken for deity, and we need to understand that. To explain this, she says, the Yod Heva, or Yod Heva, is termed the tetrachram, and of Adam and Eve, it will just suffice to remind the reader the following verses in Genesis with the meanings given as it should be interpreted. 1. And God, which is Elohim, created man in their own image, male and female, created he him. Male and female created he him and called his name Adam. We have to remember what the secret doctrine tells us, and also it's in here, that man in his first appearance is androgynous. Androgynous. So if you change those his to their and them to him, this interpretation totally changes. So when the ternary is taken at the beginning of the tetragram, it expresses the divine creation spiritually, because we are spiritual at the beginning, without any carnal sin. Taken at its opposite end, it expresses the latter. It becomes feminine. The name of Eve is composed of 3 letters. That of the primitive of heavenly Adam, it is just 1 letter, which is Yod. And that's the difference. And so it must be read Jehovah or Eve. The Adam of the first chapter is a spiritual, therefore it is an androgen, Adam Katman. When woman issues from the rib of the second Adam, the pure Virgo is separated and falling into generation, or the downward cycle becomes Scorpio, emblem of sin and matter, while the ascending cycle points at the purely spiritual races, or the 10 pre-diluvian patriarchs, the Prajapati and the Sephiroth, all being the same, are led on by the creative deity itself, whose Adam Katman. The lower one is that of the terrestrial races, led on by Enoch or Libra, the 7th, who, because he is half divine, half terrestrial, is said to have been taken by God alive. Enoch, Hermes, Libra are one and the same. All are the scales of universal harmony. Justice and equilibrium are placed at the central point of the zodiac. The grand cycle of the heavens, as well as discourse upon by Plato, symbolizes the unknown as a unity, and the smaller circles, which form the cross by their division on the plane of the zodiacal ring, typify at the point of their intersection life. The centripetal and the centrifugal forces, as symbols of good and evil, the spirit and matter, life and death, are also those of the creator and the destroyer. Adam and Eve, good and bad. In the subjective as well as in the objective world, they are the 2 powers which, through their eternal conflict, keep the universe in spirit and matter in harmony. They force the planets to pursue their paths and keep them in their elliptical orbits, thus tracing the astronomical cross in their revolution through the zodiac. In their conflict, the centripetal force, were it to prevail, would drive the planets and living souls into the sun, type of the invisible spiritual sun, the Para-Atma, or the great universal soul, their parent, while the centrifugal force would chase both planets and souls into the drearier space, far from the luminary of the objective universe, away from the spiritual realm of salvation and eternal life, and into the chaos of final cosmic destruction and individual annihilation. But the balance is there, ever sensitive at the intersection point. It regulates the action of the 2 combatants, and combined effort of both causes planets and living souls to pursue a double diagonal line in their revolution through zodiac and life, and thus preserving a strict harmony in visible and invisible heaven and earth. The forced unity of the 2 reconciles spirit and matter. Enoch is said to stand a Metatron mediator before God, reckoning from him down to Noah and his 3 sons. Each of these represents a new world, that is our earth, which is the 7th after every period of geological transformation gives birth to another and distinct race of men and beings. Now, science shows that our globe has passed through 5 distinct geological phases, each characterized by a different stratum. Starting with the last one first, the Quaternary period, in which man appears as a certainty. 2, the Tertiary period, in which he may have appeared. Number 3, Secondary period, that of gigantic saurians, the Megalosaurus, Plesiosaurus, no vestige of man. 4, the Paleozoic period, that of gigantic crustacea. And 5, or first, the Azoic period, during which science asserts organic life had not yet appeared. But is it really that way, or is it the way that the Theosophical writings explain it? We have to ask the question, why no vestige of men is found in those periods? Remember, when we first descend into matter, we're very spiritual and we're very etheric. The spirits leave no skeletons or fossils behind, and yet few are the men on earth who doubt that men can live both objectively and subjectively. At all events, the theology of the Brahmans, wary with antiquity and which divides the formative periods of earth into 4 ages and places between each of these a lapse of 1,728,000 years, far more agrees with the official science and modern discovery than the absurd chronological notions promulgated by the councils of Nice and Trent. Here again, she is putting this philosophy to the forefront and challenging the chronology of the Bible, because who can think that the world could progress in such a short period of time that the Bible gives to our origin and the progression. She tells us in these books that nature does not progress fast. Everything it does is very slow. So it requires millions and millions of years to the evolution process is very slow. We do not evolve. Now, in this philosophy, the soul is pre-existent because it is immortal. But in the theological world, a soul is made for every child that is born on earth. Even during Ammonius Saccas's time, Origen and Clement of Alexandria, who were students of Ammonius Saccas, who informed that in the Gnostic philosophy, promulgated that philosophy that which is the pre-existence of the soul. Now, Origen was excommunicated, sent out of Alexandria, but he never stopped giving this philosophy out. Even though he was a Christian father, he would not go along with the Orthodox philosophy that the church was putting forth at that time. So, each human soul has to come to these realities through its own effort as well. This is not a philosophy that can be put in from the outside. First, the soul has to be awakened to its inner life and inner possibilities. But this is common sense. any human soul that reads this philosophy can not possibly find it that it doesn't sit with their common sense. After all, this is sanctified common sense. So to this student, this comparison is very useful because it makes sense that our universe evolves through cycles, that it comes into objective existence, and then it goes into subjective. One is lunar, the other one is sun. So it is important to understand it. Now, this is all the time we have for this. There is this much more to give. However, before we close, I would like to make a suggestion to all those of you who are interested in furthering your studies, that if you go to the Secret Doctrine on page 375.
Which volume?
I think it is number 2. The Sephira of construction are the 6 Dayan Shohans or Manus or Prajapati, synthesized by the 7, and who are called therefore the builders of the lower or physical universe and belong below. So you can read this for yourselves. It's very suggestive. And the other one is on 247. It says as a footnote, Daksha, the intelligent, the competent. The name generally carries with it the idea of creative power. He's a son of Brahma and of Aditi, and agreeably to other versions, a self-born power, which like Minerva sprang from his father's body. He is the chief of the Prajapati, the lords of or creators of being. In Vishnu Purana, Parasara says of him, in every kalpa or manvantara, Daksha and the rest are born and are again destroyed. And the Rig Veda says that Daksha sprang from Aditi and Aditi from Daksha, a reference to the eternal cyclic rebirth of the same divine essence. I'd like to read this from page 469. All the legends of creation, the fall of men, and the resultant deluge belong to universal history. In other words, she's telling us that if we don't go to the deluge in the Brahmanical books, which is the origin of all the writings, and then also follow the Egyptian version of that deluge, we will never understand what is in Genesis. And the resultant deluge belong to universal history and are no more the property of the Israelites than that of any other nation. What especially belongs to them, Kabbalists accepted, are the disfigured details of every tradition. The Genesis of Enoch is by far anterior to the books of Moses, and Postel has presented it to the world, explaining the allegories as far as he dared, but the groundwork is still unexposed. In 168 BC, Jerusalem had its temple plundered, and all of the sacred books were destroyed. Therefore, the few manuscripts that remained were to be found only among the teachers of tradition. The Kabbalistic Tanaim and their initiates and prophets had always practiced its teaching in common with the Canaanites, the Hamites, Midianites, Chaldeans, and all other nations. So you can read more about it for yourself. in 5 years of Theosophy, the key has been turned one time again for us, and these are in relation to the Sanskrit names, which are given in 5 years of Theosophy, page 104 to 105. The names of the signs are given: Mesha, Rishabha, Mithunam, Karkataka, Simha, Kanya, Tula, Vrishika, Dhanus, Makara, Kumbha, Meenam, and on the right the same names as that have been put on the board. Now, the summarization of what that article is on page 117. 1 is Mesha, the self-existent eternal Brahman. 2 is Rishabha, which is Pranava, Aum. 3, Mithunam, the androgyne Brahma, or the bisexual Sephira, which is Adam Katman, which we refer to today. 4, the sacred Tetrachra, the 4 matras of Pranava, the 4 estates of Brahma, the sacred Dharaka. 5, Simha, the 5 Brahmas, the 5 Buddhas representing in their totality the Jivatma. 6 is Kanya, the astral light, the Holy Virgin, the 6 forces in nature. 7, the 36 Tattvams born of Avidya, which is Tula in Sanskrit. 8 is Vrishika, the universe in thought, the Swapnavasha, the microcosm looked at from a subjective point of view. 9 represents the 9 Prajapatis, the assistants of Demiurgo. 10, Makara, the shape of the material universe in the mind of the Demiurgos, the dodecahedron. 11, Kumbha, the 14 lokas. 12, Meenam, the 5 elements. So if you read these articles and combine the information given in the secret doctrine that we read from, the ISIS and 5 years of Theosophy, it gives you a good comprehensive idea that what is given in ISIS Unveiled is the truth, because it correlates with all the other information obtained on the same subject. Now we'll answer your question.
Could you say again why we went from 10 to 12 in the zodiac?
Because it became necessary. Remember, the first 6 signs represent the macrocosm, the ascending cycle, which is the spiritual. But when we descend, then we have the descending cycle, which represents the microcosm. But then the 2 that were secret signs had always been in the possession of the initiates. But when it became necessary that the universe also know about it, they could not give the secret signs, because those 2 are the ones that really explain the progression of the human race and how the successive races come about. So they couldn't give it out in its true form, but they represented it in the 7th, which is Libra, and gave as much of the philosophy that they could to the general public. And then the descending line from Virgo to Scorpio have this central point where it shows that this is the point where that balance is maintained. Because remember what she says in the secret doctrine, when we are descending into substance, that energy is which one? Centrifugal. In other words, nature pushes everything forward to higher expression of itself. But once the midpoint is reached, it's centripetal, where centripetal energy has to be used to achieve returning home. And that is where self-induced, self-devised effort for the human soul is necessary. The descending, we're virgin souls. We are spirit and soul. We are ignorant of the material aspects of life. But as we descend into it and learn it, it's the same thing as eating the apple example in the Genesis. We become sinful not because we are participating in knowledge, it's because we misuse it. We don't use it properly. It is a natural cycle we go through, because this is how progressive human races appear on Earth for their evolutionary process, which is a very slow process. But nevertheless, we have to go through it, because our purpose is not that just we learn and experience and become souls who eventually learn to perceive their inner nature, because we forget it as we are descending into substance, but that we are also uplifting everything around us. In the ocean of theosophy, Mr. Judge gives us this stupendous program that everything has to be elevated to the highest degree possible by the end of the 7th round. And in order to do that, man is the link between all of the chains of existence, the lower as well as higher. We're not simple little human beings. We just said we come from the Dian-Shohanic host. Only our body uses the substance of the earth because it's the temple of the soul, and it uses the substance of this earth to make that temple for itself. But the objective is to raise everything up. So then this balance point is Libra, because it represents Enoch and Hermes in the philosophical writings. It's one and the same thing. So she is bringing it to our attention that the zodiac is represented in the ephemerized patriarchs of the Jewish religion, and that this is a deceptive way of how the rabbinical theologians went about hiding the secret from the common people.
You talked about Genesis and the other books of the Bible. The way this student understands it, Genesis is probably as esoteric as anything we have, but, and I haven't seen this in writing, but logic tells me that the Bible, Christianity, and even Judaism, being very material, starts with the material man, for example, in Genesis. And whereas this philosophy, it goes into pre-material phases, as spiritual phases, etc. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to put this in perspective, because well, there may be certainly reasons why we need to try to reconcile some of the information in modern Christianity or in Christianity period. I think that's basically the reason, in my mind, why we have what appears to be these inconsistencies, because this is purely everything spiritual, attempt to reconcile the ancient religion, ancient wisdom, from spirituality all the way around to materiality and back to spirituality. And it doesn't start with just with the appearance of man on this physical earth.
But remember that without man, nothing can evolve, because man is the
Exactly.
central energy. It is in it, but not as living entities, but the energy that they have has to be there for any sort of evolution to start and be carried forward. But what you observed is correct. The wisdom of the ages brings forth that we are spiritual entities, that when we are in incarnation on earth, this is when we have a body. But when we go to a rest period, which is called the Devakanic interlude, which is the heaven of the Christian religion, it is not really a place. It's simply a change of consciousness. What we are here reminded of is that life is on a continuum, that we come and we go. There is no such thing as death. Only the body falls off, and that is what death describes. Men's inner principles, the higher levels of consciousness, is on a continuum. There is no such thing as death. And this philosophy is one of nobility, because it gives us hope, but at the same time it gives each human being responsibility for their own life, because nothing comes from nothing. What we have done in the past results in the life that we're living now. What we do in this life will affect the next incarnation, because we come and go. At the Kali Yuga stage, life on earth is about 100 years. Most of us don't even make it there, but as science tells us, life was in shorter duration in the previous centuries, and now as medicine and other health improvements come about, we're living longer and longer. So some of us live to 100 or a little bit above. Yes?
Can you talk about the fact that we are in the age of Aquarius and what that means? And also, just when a person is born under the specific sign, what that should tell us, and I don't know if you can go into the details as much as the rising sign, the moon sign. There's a lot of details like that, but just some general insights would be appreciated.
Astrologically, this student cannot give you any answers to your question, because HPV says that coming under a specific sign means something on your earth life, because the events that are going to be presented are under that sign. So if you can read it properly, it gives you an indication as to what is going to happen. But what is not said is that you have a choice to make. There is no predestination in these things. You make your choices in every event that occurs to you in that particular life. And if you're attuned to your inner life, that's where the guidance comes from, not from the heavens, from your own inner life. So from that perspective, under the sign we're born has a tremendous significance for each human soul. But as I said, it's a general statement she makes. She says that if this philosophy truly is understood, astrology would be a science, because it is based on a mathematical foundation. What was your other question?
Age of Aquarius?
Aquarius, yes. We moved into Aquarius right at that time when HPV came. What was it that she was trying to do? If you look at the philosophical writing, you get a glimpse of it. She came to the Victorian age, which was a closed society with a predetermined outlook towards life. We're in Kali Yuga. dark age. What does it suggest to you? We're materialistic, selfish, and self-centered. The human life has lost its upward tendencies because we have been immersed in material. But HPV says we should have grown out of it because humanity has now matured. We have not grown out of it. There's a very small portion of us that have grown out of it, and even those who have grown out of it is not totally grown out of it, but to some degree they have. Her ideology was, when she came, was to start a new current of thought. Why? Because at this stage, Kamamanas is in the ascendancy, because our passional nature affects the mind, the intellectual mind. This is the intellectual mind. Unless this is understood, none of this philosophy is understood. Intellectual. Okay. She wanted us to go towards Buddhimanas. This is our spiritual soul. And divine mind. This is the current she came to establish. How do we put this Buddhi-monastic element into action in our lives? Well, she gave us the voice of the silence, which tells us of the paramita path. What about this philosophy? What is it that constantly stressed? Selflessness, service to humanity, however small that service is, whatever we're capable of doing, we do. So, paramita path. What else? Yoga. Which kind of yoga? Raja yoga. Selflessness. Service. Okay. There is constant reminding of us that masters of wisdom are real, that unless that conviction is in the heart, we won't progress very far. This is their philosophy. What is it that they want us to do? Move towards compassionate action. Compassion is the law. Is law. So compassionate action is service to humanity. This is the Aquarian age. We are to become compassionate, and in doing that service, forget the little self and work with the higher aspect of our nature. And that is not automatic until we read, learn, and give it out. In other words, that is also service, because it is very much needed in the universe for individuals who are seeking to be able to find this philosophy, because it has been wiped out of us through our environment, our education system, theology. All of the religions of the West simply do not promulgate karma and reincarnation. But the East, if you look at the East, the Hindu, the Buddhist, all of those countries have, from beginning to now, believed and promulgated these doctrines, because they are engraved in it. They're spiritual entities, regardless of how superficial or superstition gets into it. They still hold on to this philosophy to some degree. Whereas in the West, it's been missing because the Orthodox father, for some reason, decided to take it out. Now, in the Muslim religion, Muhammad left it open-ended. He did not define what God was. He only defined how to serve God by becoming submissive. And submission, in a way, is humility, if you think about it. So he didn't define it, but the conditions he put around, that you have to be clean, that you have to give some of your earnings or wealth to the poor, suggests that he was promulgating esoterically this religion, the wisdom religion, because all those that come, even the minor representatives in the universe, come from that brotherhood. So this is where we are going. If you find that current she started, don't ever let it go, because it's there.
One more question or comment. You talked about the material level being this God, third great God, which really means something, certainly a lot in this philosophy. But for the person who goes to church every week and so forth, we also see in the Gita that he who basically, that God is mine, say is Krishna.
Whatever you follow.
They will eventually get there, but the point is, they've been temporarily diverted, if I understand it correctly.
Temporarily diverted. We've been at it for 2,000 years. If
Well,
you remember
2,000 years is nothing in terms of this
because the wisdom
religion.
Wisdom religion disappeared from the surface about 400 with the death of Hypatia.
Gotcha.
But since then, the church really has done humanity a tremendous disservice, because they persecuted all of the Gnostics, all of the inquirers after the true philosophy. If they had allowed it, all of the mosque, the temple, the church would be a meeting place for sharing these ideas amongst humanity today. But they erased it out of our memory, and now we have to put it back in, and that is the difficulty.
Well, the Gnostics, the early church included the Gnostics a lot, and it was there. It got taken out because of individuals within the church.
Because the Gnostics understood the inner meaning of the Christ principle, that is not a person, it's a principle in each human heart. How could they possibly argue with the Orthodox fathers? The argument will not carry the day if one does not perceive these things internally. And Orthodox fathers, the first few may have been understanding of this philosophy, but the ignorant ones that came after did not understand it, obviously. So now the cycle has turned. We're on our outward journey to spirituality, and we have the philosophy presented to us, and we can make use of it and help all those around us to make use of it too. Thank you.